I hit the.
Great.
So we
All
can
right.
proceed, but nobody can see, he can't see the gallery. So if you want to speak, can you use the raise your hand using the raise your hand feature, and Bob or I will call on you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Let's call the meeting to order. Nancy, you have the attendance there all set?
Yes.
All right. So we can go right to review and approval of minutes from December.
Oh, wait a minute. Kinjal is not here. I thought he was. It's
He
Tom
was.
instead.
Nancy, do you have Bob Ike?
Yes,
Yes, so we have, but that's still not, I think we need one more. 1, 2,
Okay.
3, 4, 5. We need one more for a quorum. Oh, Chris is here, so we're good.
here.
Chris. Great. All right. We'll call the meeting to order again. And Nancy, you've got the roll call. Old business, review and approve minutes of December 1st. Does anybody have any corrections to make to the minutes? Don't hear anything.
I'll move approval of the minutes of December 1st.
All right. Moved by Bob Berman, seconded by. Can we get a second?
I'll second.
Jesse, seconded.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. All in favor of approval of the minutes, please say aye.
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 Any nays? Okay. We have approval of the motion. Thank you. New business, committee reports. We've got, Max, you have anything for outreach at this point?
No report at this time, Mark. Thanks.
All right. Oh, nice background. I'm seeing it for the first time. Thank you. All right. Leah, programming.
No report.
Thank you, Leah. And Bob Berman, owners rep.
The only report I have is that Nancy will be sending out to the subcommittee members copies of 2 previous RFPs that we can look at, see if we need to make any changes to over the next week and a half or so. Those will be coming out to us this week.
All right.
That's it.
All right. Thank you. So director's report, Elizabeth, if you would, please.
Thank you, Chair. We continue to work on programming for both locations, currently with a specific focus on Prosser Youth and the McMahon location. Now that the referendum is passed, we are also focusing on cleaning out our 2 physical libraries and getting rid of things that we know we will not need in the future. And I also wanted to note that we just passed a wonderful milestone, 7,000 plus card holders in the town of Bloomfield. I think that not only the library's efforts, but the efforts of the building committee and the library board and the Friends have helped us reach that milestone. And we look forward to continuing to ride on that wave of getting library cards in the hands of our residents. Thank you.
Questions for Elizabeth?
No hands are raised.
No hands are raised. I don't hear anything. All right, very good. Thanks, Elizabeth. Project update from our architect. I know that Richard notified us that he was unable to join us tonight. He did send in sort of an update report. Nancy, do you have that email handy?
I think I do. Hold on.
If you could read that for us. It was brief.
Let's see.
Well, actually, I was hoping to read it myself, but I had to switch devices here. But I may be able to find it here.
Okay,
Oh, great. Go ahead, Nancy.
I think I found it. Hold on. Maybe it's not the one I wanted. Okay. I'm not able to attend this evening's building committee meeting. Wanted to give you an update. We have been proceeding with schematic design for Prosser and McMahon. I'm glad you have received proposals from surveyors. Hopefully you can select a surveyor and authorize them to proceed as soon as possible. We need to compare the theoretical flood elevation on the site with the actual elevation of the existing ground floor at Prosser. Elizabeth has reported that flooding has occurred on the ground floor of Prosser, and we'd like to know what the difference is between the building's actual ground floor elevation and the town's mapped flood elevation. In designing the new Prosser, we want to make sure we set the lower level entrance at the correct elevation above the floodplain. A difference of 1 foot can have a big impact on site design and on the building design. Meantime, we would have no objection to any of the firms who have submitted proposals to you for surveying or geotechnical engineering. I understand the next scheduled meeting for the committee is December 29th, which is on my calendar.
Great. Thanks, Nancy. And we'll be getting into those proposals when Nancy gives her report. So we don't have an opportunity for questions, but if anybody has comments regarding architectural work at this point, now would be the time.
I don't see any hands raised.
Okay.
Mark,
All
I
right.
did want to let you know Kinjal has joined us.
Oh, great. Thank you. All right. And so do we have Downs representative here?
Yes, we have both Scott Scholl and Tom Romanoli. I'm not sure which one is going to take the lead, but we'll turn it over to them.
Yes, thank you.
Hey, everyone. Good evening. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So for schedule update, we do have our schedule up, which I just blocked by accident. From our last few owners meetings, we've talked about an early bid package for at least demolition to start with. Sorry, I'm just trying to find my controls. There they are. But I haven't outlined that in the schedule yet because we just want to see more progress before we can get to that comes to fruition. What we have put on the schedule is tracking items from the town for when they start and how long they're going to take. I did just get some recent information, but that's still being worked out with the surveyor as far as who the town's going to go with and how many days of what the lead time will be on their survey and procurement. So we did make a line item for site survey, geotechnical investigation, which I know Nancy is working on both of those. And then the hazmat investigation, I think we're just waiting on that for the RFQ to go out, which probably won't be till after the new year, Nancy. Yep. So we've laid that out on the schedule and we'll track those accordingly to see how we affect our dates. All right. But the SD drawings, as Richard had mentioned last meeting, did start December 1st. They're into it and it has a duration of 64 days going to February 28th. So we'll watch that and work with that and see where we end up. For site logistics development, Nancy, who's the consultant for traffic control that you were looking at?
I didn't think I was looking at one.
Oh, okay. Okay. Maybe that's the design team.
Yeah,
thought,
Scott, I think that might be in TSKP's under their umbrella.
Okay. That's fine. So that Richard, okay, then Richard has to get back to us on that. So maybe we'll get an update next Tuesday when we have a meeting. Can everyone hear me okay?
yes.
We're good.
All right. So verification of existing conditions, that's what we just talked about in regards to environmental consultants. I did take some of the proposals that Nancy received and put them down here as general costs for the overall costs between the survey and the Welty geotechnical I think we just have one proposal for geotech, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So I don't know if anyone has any comments on that, but I know the town's still going through them and analyzing them with the design team.
Yeah, Nancy's going to report on that following you.
Yep, okay. Library grant approval process, that was completed, so I'll update that. We are approved. And do we have any update in regards to the review of our draft contract?
I believe it's back signed.
You are correct.
Yep, okay. I thought I saw an email on that. Yes,
Yeah.
it's back signed and filed.
All right, I didn't get that,
Like,
but I will update
Yep, I'll
that.
get you, yeah, I'll get you a copy of that, Scott. My fault.
No problem.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
Thank thank you.
and that's all I got.
Yep, okay. Thanks, Scott.
Question for Scott and Tom.
It's Bob. I just have a comment for Scott and Tom about the rotaries. I think if you talk to Jonathan Tees, the town engineer, you'll find out that if the rotaries do go forward, it's quite a few years in the future, if they ever go forward. So it's not going to impact us at all.
Well, that's good. Okay, good.
Other questions for Scott or Tom? Any hands up out there?
No.
Don't see any.
All right, guys. Thank you for that. Nancy, you're on with approval of purchases.
Yes. I sent you the quotes that we had received. We received one quote for geotechnical. The other ones never came in. I did review this quote. Some of the pricing was a little confusing, so I reviewed the quote with Max Welty earlier today. So I want to summarize it for you. If you looked on page 2 of the quote, it had 7 different charges. Some of these charges are not really needed for this phase of the work. So what would be needed would be number 1, which is a lump sum of $15,000. Then you would have to add in number 3 for the testing charges, and there are 14 borings at $100 each, plus $300 for the, assuming one is for excavation and clay. So that item comes to $1,700. Then you have to add in item number 6, which is $500 for the reports. And is there another one? I thought there was a $5,000 one.
Number 4.
Oh, number 4, thank you, for the geotech studies for both sites. So that comes to $22,200. The other items we've got, just for explanation purposes, but not necessary to authorize at this time, would be additional borings beyond 25 feet, and that's at $800 each. Number 5 and number 7 would be for services that may be needed during specification development or during construction. So for purposes of the initial work, the total would be $22,200. I would suggest that maybe we authorize the not to exceed amount a little bit higher than that. So if we did have to go for some additional borings or beyond the depth that they had specified, we don't have to come back to you and we can continue to move forward. So it would be my recommendation that you authorize issuing a purchase order to Welty Geotechnical in the amount that you may want to determine.
Nancy, you have a recommendation based on the those extras for additional?
I would say probably $5,000 might cover it. So that would be $27,200.
Nancy, has TSKP had a chance to review this proposal as to what they're doing for scope and if they're in agreement with that scope for the geotech?
They actually gave me the scope.
Perfect.
So, and they have reviewed the quote. They're fine. Actually, the quote lists TSKP as a reference of theirs, and they have worked with them before, and they would have no issue if the town were to move forward retaining Welty to do the work. By the way, this same firm did do the geotechnical work at 330 Park. And we're satisfied with the services we received.
And
Would
do
someone
we-
like to make a motion?
Just one more-
I'll move that we appropriate not to exceed amount of $27,200 to Welty Geotechnical PC for the engineering services opposed to Prosser and McMahon sites.
Second,
Thank you for the motion and the second. Further discussion?
Can I just go back to the geotech report? Can we get a quick response from them to see what it would cost to go deeper on the boring of the site? My concern is somewhere near the stream, we may have to go deeper than 25 feet.
I think that was 25 feet beyond the additional depth. The 9 borings to 25 feet. Oh, there's one boring at 75 feet. I'm sorry. So anything beyond 25 feet is $800. No, I'm sorry. Those are just additional borings.
Yeah, no, I'm seeing 9 borings to 25 feet and one
Yeah, you're
boring
right.
75 feet.
Man is 4 to 25 and 1 to 60.
Well, the 9 borings at 25 and 1 at 75 is for Prosser, and 4 borings, 3 at 25 and 1 at 60 feet for McMahon. So Kinjal, we've got 1 boring at 75 right now in the package for Prosser.
Okay.
Excuse me,
Other-
do we need to identify the items as being 1, 3, 4, and 6 in the motion?
No, I'll do that when we issue the purchase order, since I did take notes when I spoke to Max.
Any other comments or questions? No hands up?
No hands.
All right. And all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any nays? All right, we have a motion passed. Thank you. Nancy, what else do you have?
Okay. Next, we have 2 quotes that we received for the surveys. One was from Jonathan Tarbox, and the second one was, sorry, where I put it. I'm just struggling to find it.
Todd Hesketh.
Oh, Hesketh, right. Which I don't know where I put it. I did get some additional clarification on the time of work. What it would take to complete the work from Tarbox, because that was not in your original email, and it was 45 days for both Prosser together, 45 days for Prosser and Wintonbury, and 60 days for the Riley lumber property. Since there was a difference in price, but time is of the essence, I did reach out to the architect TSKP and asked them if they could live with the lower quote. It's 60 days for, because essentially the other quote was for 7 weeks, 6 weeks, I'm sorry, 6 weeks, so is 42 days. So there really wasn't a big difference in time. But I asked if they would be able to live with 60 days for the Riley lumber property. And then we discussed that we would see if we could switch out, and I have not had a chance yet, with Tarbox, and they said yes. But we thought it might be preferable if maybe Tarbox could do Riley Lumber and Prosser in 45 days, and then Wintonbury in 60 days, because that's a relatively flat site. So really wasn't, the survey is not as critical for the work. I read you TSKP's email earlier today, so they were a little bit more concerned about the elevations for Prosser than they are about Van. So it would be my recommendation that we move forward with Tarbox, since they are substantially lower to do the work.
So in summary, we're looking at a savings of about $10,000 to accept someone who's going to take a little bit longer to do the second or the less important site, whether it be Riley or McMahon. In terms of the architect's design, Prosser is the priority.
Correct.
So we have an amount from Tarbox of $12,860 for all 3 locations. Do we have a motion to accept that proposal?
So moved.
Moved by Bob Ike, seconded by
I'll second it.
Bob Berman. Thank you. Discussion?
I just have one comment on it. I don't know if anybody else does. It, knowing that we're talking about 45 days for Prosser, which is important. Hopefully writing can be part of that, but if not, then it's not. That puts us up. If we presume that they're going to start, what, 2 weeks from now? January 1st. That 45 days puts us in the middle of February, which is roughly when we're supposed to have the schematic drawings pretty well done. I don't know if that creates an issue or not. I just wanted to bring it up.
Well, with either surveyor, we're into that, 45 days. So I know TSKP is just going to have to adjust their schedule, possibly, depending on when this actually comes in. There maybe there's some preliminary spot elevations that can happen sooner to let them go ahead with some of the critical design. But we could play that by ear as we go forward in the next few weeks, next month.
The other thing is, when I look at the schedule from Downs, look at the timing and the dates, we have a little bit of punch time built in the future. That if we need to use, we can do it. Because there's some things that can be compressed or shifted around a little bit. So I think we're going to be okay, even if it was tied in all the way up to the middle of February for sure.
Other comments, questions?
Can Joe
Nancy.
stand up?
So a couple of notes I have. I thought TSKP was going to start using the existing site plan from Town Hall to kind of start working on the SK process, assuming it's accurate. So I think with reasonable certainty, they can move forward with getting the SK portion started. And it's a matter of coordinating with the site surveyor to at least get the main points of the site so we're not too far off on the building, and work our way into the DDs when the site survey is done, or in mid-February where TSKP can just kind of make tweaks. Hopefully it's just tweaks to the site.
Right.
I'd rather not use up whatever the fluff time is in the future this early in the stage, because let's face it, the way things are going, we're going to have some design issues and stuff that's going to eat that up.
Right. And none of us want to cut the schematic design short because everything has to be correct,
Right.
to move forward. So, yeah. Other comments?
I also did want to mention that both of these proposals were reviewed also by TSKP. They were fine with either one of the surveyors.
All right, let's hold the vote. All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any nays? All right, motion passes. Thank you, everybody. All right, next item is our future meetings, 2 weeks from tonight, December 29th, and then we are into the new year, January 12th. Anybody know of any problems attending at this point?
I'll be on the cruise, but I'll try to cruise in if I'm able.
Yeah, we want to see a good background there, Bob, you know, behind you. So yeah, let us know whether you'll be able to do that. All right. So let's go on to comments from the committee. And I just want to open that up with, I mentioned at our last meeting that Deputy Mayor Greg Davis is the liaison from town council to this committee. And that has been made official at this point. So we welcome you again, Greg, to the committee. And I want to thank you, Greg, and Mayor Wong, who have officially changed the charge of our committee, that we are now the Library Building Committee as opposed to the Prosser Library Building Committee. So thank you for making that change. I think it reflects the whole library system that we're working with. And the only other comment, no, I have no other comments. I'll open it up to other committee members.
Anybody's hands raised?
Any hands raised?
Don't see any.
We're good. All right. So let's go to public comments. Nancy, we have members of the public.
Yes. First, we have Sten Casperson. Okay, Sten, unmute yourself and go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to pass along to the committee and others a question that I've been asked from other residents. It's really very simple, and I don't know if this has been expressed. The state grant of $1 million and the referendum value of ABC dollars, do those $2 go together? A plus B to give a budget number? How does, I mean, people are curious how that works. If you could put that in the minutes, maybe that would help out. I know I'm not supposed to ask a question.
Do you have any other comments, Sten?
I'm sorry, no, thank you.
Oh, okay, you do. And I know this isn't supposed to be Q&A, but Sten, we've also received that question, and the grant reduces the amount of the town's authorization to bond. So if it's $29.2 million, a town would then bond. The project amount stays the same, but the source of the funds is reduced on the town's behalf for what we would have to be bond. Hope that answers it.
It does, thank you.
Other public comments, Nancy?
Anybody else in the public, please raise your hand. No other comments from the public.
All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Ike, seconded by
Second, I'll second it.
Mr. Berman. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? All right, we are adjourned. I thank everybody, and we will happy holidays, and we will see you in 2 weeks.
Yep.
Enjoy your vacation.